Hello everyone, welcome to my class. This online lecture is about opinions and support, making arguments and counter-arguments. Thank you for coming. If you're not in my class at all, well, welcome, and however you found this video, I hope it's what you need right now for whatever you're studying. So, I'm Rob Auahand, and today we're talking about opinions and support, arguments and counter-arguments here at Professor Rob O. I hope I don't need to persuade you about this, but sharing opinions is important. Having opinions is important. Have you ever talked to somebody who doesn't have opinions about many things? So what do you like? Well, I don't know, whatever. Did you like the movie? Yeah, well, it was good. What kind of music do you like? You know, anything. It's just boring to talk to somebody who doesn't have opinions about anything. And usually I find my conversations become more interesting once I finally do find the areas where somebody actually has opinions. And a lot of the time early in my conversation, most of my effort is trying to find those areas. Even if I don't have opinions about a topic, a lot of the time I can still have an interesting conversation just by finding out the other person's opinions and asking questions. That is a social skill, learning people's opinions and getting people to share them. But opinions can also be an academic skill. Developing an opinion is the basic process of thinking and working through a problem that you need to use everywhere in academic work, as well as one of the most basic job skills that you will need, because what is working in your job except gathering information, learning something, and then making a decision about what you or your team should do. In order to guide your team or suggest an idea, you need to develop an opinion. And you also need to be good at explaining your opinion so that other people can agree with you and follow the course that you suggest. Opinions matter. Now, the funny thing about opinions, though, is in my experience, especially since I started teaching adults, I found something funny happen when I brought topics into classes that tried to find out students' opinions. And what would happen is I would bring some controversial topic into class and I was excited about the conversation we'd have, and then the class would avoid disagreeing. I'd go and find some topic that I thought there would be lots of disagreement because that makes an energetic conversation, and instead they'd look for some common ground, find some area of the topic that they do agree, and once they found that common ground, kind of stop talking about the topic. Yes, I see that we all agree that education is important. Well, that's great. Okay, teacher, we're finished. And of course, I wanted them to keep talking. So this happened again and again. So I started thinking about it and asking about it, looking into it. Now, why do people seem nervous or afraid to disagree on a topic? And I've heard a number of questions. I've heard a number of answers to this. So I'd like you to think about that yourself. And if you're taking notes during this online lecture, then get out your notebook and pause the video for about a minute or two and write down 3 or 4 or 5 reasons you can think of that people might seem nervous or afraid to disagree on a topic. It might help to think about a time in your life that you decided not to disagree with somebody about something, even though you actually disagreed. Perhaps you had an awkward conversation during a family holiday where somebody had an opinion that you didn't like. Did you argue with that uncle or with your grandpa, or did you just say nothing? Why did you say nothing? Okay, think about that. Pause this video, write down a few reasons, and then come back and we'll talk about it a little more. Okay, I hope you've had enough time. Now, here are some of the reasons I've heard that people avoid disagreement. One is simply that it makes people feel awkward. They feel awkward when they disagree with somebody. It makes an uncomfortable type of conversation. Sometimes people have some area or topic that is like stepping on a hornet's nest for them. And once you get into that topic, you're going to hear everything they think. And it might be kind of intense or even awkward or uncomfortable. What if I'm wrong? Another thing that can happen is instead of getting an angry response, well, you might just fall into a conversation with somebody who knows a lot more than you and makes you feel foolish, embarrasses you with knowing so much more than you about the topic. And another thing that can happen is, what if somebody has an experience that I don't know about? Maybe somebody's talking about protests and giving some opinion about political protests. Well, what if somebody in the conversation had a relative who was badly hurt at a protest? What if one of your relatives was a police officer who saw one of their coworkers badly hurt at a protest? They might have some kind of an emotional reaction to the topic of protests that you wouldn't expect. And then suddenly you're dealing with a bunch of unexpected, surprising feelings in the middle of a conversation where you thought you would just be sharing your opinions. Another one is what if I'm labeled a troublemaker? What if bringing up a topic where people have strong feelings and get into arguments, well, what if people think I'm that guy who likes to start a fight? That's not so good, especially if it's, for example, with family or at work, where I've got to keep on working with these people. Expressing opinions can be a little risky. And another one might even just be simple kind of self-consciousness that some people just feel, I'm just not very good at explaining my opinions. Some people have trouble expressing their ideas and their thoughts, and they get mixed up or they get confused. In the end, they just feel like trying to explain their opinions is hard. Maybe because of feeling shy like that, they rarely try, which also means that they never get better. Most of these worries are based on an idea that I think is untrue. A lot of people think that it's impossible to disagree with someone nicely. A lot of people think that all disagreements always lead to hurt feelings or damaged relationships. Okay? And I've got to say, I don't think that's true. I disagree. It is possible to disagree with somebody without causing bad feelings. It has to be possible because it's impossible to always agree with everyone all the time. And in life, there will be times when you need to fight for something that you want. You need to fight for something that's important to you. Maybe that is explaining why somebody should hire you, or explaining why your boss ought to give you a raise or a promotion. Well, if you don't have any practice explaining your opinions, then when you need to explain or ask for something like that will make your life better, it might be a lot harder because you don't have much practice explaining yourself and explaining what you need or what you want. Okay? So because of that, I think it's not just possible to disagree with somebody without causing bad feelings, but it's important to know how to disagree with somebody without causing bad feelings. And to be honest, in my opinion, this is a more important skill to learn than ever. If you look on social media, if you look in the places where people are sharing ideas, you can see so much anger, distrust, dislike, hostile reactions. You can see people who are manipulating the conversation to try and get someone upset, use internet trolling. And you also see people who are so focused on getting their opinion out that they don't think about the humanity of the other people in the conversation. that it's all about my idea and not about the other people I'm talking with. This is no good because it's hard to find civility. It's hard to find polite conversation. It's hard to find thoughtful discussion of hard topics online these days. It's easier to find fights, name-calling, or accusations. If you think that, you're a bad person. Okay? Well, that's not a very good way to persuade someone. Because when somebody says, you're a bad person, me? Well, I'm going to stop listening to you now. Calling someone a bad person is not a good way to get them to listen to you. You're not going to change someone's mind that way. And there are issues where we need to change people's minds, where we need to be able to persuade people, convince them to rethink their ideas or their opinions. All the bad faith, all the bad conversation on the internet, it's a problem. One problem is just that people get their feelings hurt because they can't handle the abuse online. But an even bigger problem is a healthy democracy needs people who know how to disagree. This is not just about being polite. This is not just about data addiction or depression or internet culture and bad manners. Okay? This is also a democracy question because democracy requires a healthy civil society. Civil society is a tradition of talking about important issues. Without civil society, democracy can't work. Without having conversations about society, about difficult problems, about complex ideas, democracy doesn't work. Now, conversations happen in the public square. Okay, that's what it's called. And that might mean the public square can mean a lot of things. In a long time ago, before mass communication, the public square actually was often just a square, an open area in the middle of town where people would go and hang out and talk about things. These days, the public square is any place where we talk about big issues and news. Places like newspapers, TV, the internet, or the bar in your neighborhood where people go and chat. Any place where people discuss their country, their society, or their community and make decisions together is part of the public square. And when the public square is broken, when people don't know how to disagree, that puts a threat on democracy. The public square doesn't happen all by itself. It doesn't just appear magically or naturally. It takes work to create it, and it also takes work to protect it and make sure that it's doing its job properly, so that everybody has a chance to say their ideas. This is why freedom of speech is so important, and every democratic country puts a high value on freedom of speech. It's also why global democracy watchdog organizations like Transparency International or the UN Human Rights Commission, put a lot of focus on free speech and a free press. Okay, a media that's free to say what they think. Democracy depends on the idea that if everybody gets to say their ideas and their thoughts, the best ideas will persuade people and gather followers. Those people will share that idea and it will spread more, until it becomes so widespread that leaders hear them and use them in their policies. Okay, the idea of a public square is based on the idea that big discussions of complex ideas is a place where the best ideas will survive and bad ideas will be thrown away or rejected. If people feel shy or worried that, oh, well, if I say this on the internet, people are going to be mean to me. Well, if people aren't sharing their ideas, then the best ideas cannot rise to the top. And if people have bad ideas that are ugly, and they're shy to share them, then they can't bring them out into the light where somebody can correct that wrong idea or bad idea. We're very bad at disagreeing these days. Right now, instead of treating people who disagree with us like fellow citizens who are also out there trying their best trying to find the best way to have a society or to have a country or a community, instead of treating people like friends who must be understood. We are treating people who disagree with us like enemies who must be defeated. Okay, that kind of response is not helping the best ideas come to the top. Right now, the country and the planet need good ideas. To figure out what to do to fix those problems, we need to be able to talk to each other. Really talk. And for that, we also need to be able to disagree. That's what this lecture is about, and that's why this lecture matters. Now, there are ways to discuss difficult and complex ideas in public. There are ways to do it that don't end in a fight. But it's harder. It's harder than just typing a witty reply. Sometimes those replies can be quite witty and it feels good to write them. But writing the snappy, sharp, witty, but maybe also unkind reply to somebody's opinion that you don't like, it might actually make it harder for that person to change their mind. It takes empathy, understanding other people's feelings. It takes listening. It takes understanding, not just knowing the right facts or having a clever way to say things. Okay? The people who are good with words are not the ones who change people's minds. The people who listen and understand are the ones who change people's minds. So that's why it's important to know how to share an opinion. It's why it's important to know how to disagree as well. And today we're going to look at a few things that can help you when you disagree with someone. And then we're also going to look at some examples of an opinion with support and how to support it. So one part of having a better conversation about the world is the language of sharing opinions. The language of sharing opinions just makes it easier to share opinions. Having a few phrases that you know work to introduce an idea, to focus people's thinking on how two ideas are different, to show that you disagree or strongly agree, or phrases you can use to introduce a question or one of the reasons you disagree. All of those things can be very useful in a conversation. So if you're in my class, you can check Smart Campus and you will find a file called Debate and Opinion Language Chart. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you look at the notes under the video, I will put a link to this file in the YouTube notes so that you can also download this file and take a look. All right, I made it myself, but if you find it interesting or useful, you can take it and you can borrow it. You can use it in your class if you're a teacher, or you can use it in your class if you're a student as well. Here are some phrases that I recommend when you are talking about opinions. Now, there are a bunch of different situations that happen in a conversation where you're talking about opinions or disagreeing with people. So each of these boxes has a few phrases that might be useful in different situations. I'm not going to read this whole thing to you because that's kind of boring, but if you'd like, follow the link in the YouTube notes or download this from Smart Campus if you're in my class, and read through this handout or this sheet. A lot of these phrases are simple. Not many of them are too hard. And a lot of them you probably already know or have heard before. A lot of the time, giving tools like this is not to teach something new, but to say, you already know this. Now it's time to start using it. Okay. So, for example, you might want to give an opinion. Okay, we can use phrases like I think, or to me, or I believe. As far as I'm concerned, these are all ways to give an opinion. Now, most of these, what they do is they kind of soften your opinion. One thing that happens is, especially if you're a second language English speaker, simpler sentences are easier. because the grammar is simpler. There's less worry. Oh, what if I make a mistake? Right? As sentences get longer, it's harder to do one perfectly. So it feels natural and easy and safe to explain my ideas in simpler words and shorter sentences. The problem is, especially when you're talking about a complex or controversial topic, making short phrases, speaking in short sentences, gives the feeling that you're very confident, and it might even give the feeling of being aggressive in your opinions. So if you say, it's a bad idea, that sounds like you're very sure about yourself. Where if you say, I don't think it's a good idea, or personally, I think it's a bad idea, that seems like a bad idea. Putting a few extra words into the sentence just makes it a little softer. And by making it a little softer, you invite your partner to disagree if they want. If you say, oh, it's a bad idea, your partner might feel like, oh, well, if you feel so strongly, then I'm just going to leave it alone. But if you say, well, I think it's a bad idea. Well, I think, oh, that's a little softer. Well, why? Maybe I'll ask some questions, or maybe I'll disagree with you. Oh, you think so? Well, explain why you think that. Or, oh, you think it's a bad idea? Well, personally, I think it's a good idea. Oh, why do you think it's bad? And that invites more conversation. This is even more important when you disagree with something, because disagreeing, saying no, saying not, negative messages are where people get defensive, or people might get emotions coming in. So with disagreeing especially, phrases like, well, that's not how and phrases like, well, actually, okay, those again make things softer. Things like, that's not how I see it, or I don't really agree with you. Okay, that sounds a lot gentler than, I disagree. That's wrong. Okay, that sounds quite short. That sounds quite abrupt. I'm afraid I can't agree with you. Okay, that puts it really gently, which makes it easier for your partner to decide, oh, well, let's keep talking about this. Okay, this person doesn't sound too aggressive. Yes, that may be true, but... Okay, this is a way of showing, well, I hear what you say. Maybe some of what you say is good, but... Or you have a point, but... Okay, these are ways to make it softer when you disagree with someone. Okay, you can also check for agreement. This is useful because a conversation is a two-person or more action. You need to make sure that your partner is with you. So do you agree or don't you agree, or do you think so? These are questions that can check if your partner is with you. Along with this, okay, you can also ask a status check question like, do you know what I mean? Or do you follow what I'm saying? Or something like that. And that's another way of making sure that your partner is with you as you talk. You can introduce an opposite view. You can concede without giving up. Conceding is when your partner says something good or smart or useful. It's not a good strategy to just say, no, that's not true. Well, if what they said is true, then it's true. If they made a really good point, it's helpful in the conversation to recognize, well, you made a good point, because that shows your partner you respect their thoughts. It shows your partner you're thinking. However, maybe your partner made a good point, but they didn't quite change your mind yet. And that's when you concede without giving up. Well, that may be true, but while you're right about that, okay, these are ways to show you said something good, but you haven't convinced me yet. Okay, summarizing is a useful skill. Adding conditions, maybe sometimes I agree, but not always. Maybe I like your opinion sometimes, but sometimes I think it's wrong. Okay, phrases like that depends on, or that's only true if. You can add a condition, right? Sometimes yes, but sometimes no. You can add emphasis. You can make it stronger. Okay, that's just not true is stronger than that's not true. Or sometimes you want to calm things down. Things like, let's not get carried away. When the conversation is getting a little wild, maybe you want to cool things down. Or if you're in a social situation, then maybe you want to, let's talk about something else for a while. Okay, you can agree with people more or less strongly. You can disagree with people. You can decide that your partner still hasn't changed your mind, or you can disagree quite strongly, like at the bottom, that's out to lunch. That's a way of saying, that's nuts, no way. Or you can disagree more gently, like, well, that's not how I see it, or I don't really agree with you. Okay, and sometimes your partner has tried their best, but you are not changing your mind. They didn't persuade you, not yet, not enough. So you might want to tell them, I'm still not convinced, or you haven't persuaded me. I'm sticking to my guns is a phrase we might use to show I'm being a little stubborn. Okay, and let's agree to disagree, or I don't think this discussion's going anywhere, are phrases you might use when it's time to talk about something else. Okay, these are all useful phrases. Getting to the main point. Sometimes it's good to get back focused on the big ideas, right? And these ones are useful for that. Clarifying. If your partner seems to misunderstand you, use a clarifying phrase. And if you don't think you understand your partner, ask for clarification. A phrase like, you said this, what do you mean, is really useful. And one of my favorites on this whole handout is, so what you're saying is. And you use this one when you want to check that you understand what your partner said. So basically, you repeat your partner's argument back to them to check if you understand it correctly. This is a really useful tool for two reasons. First, it shows your partner that you really are listening to them. And second, if you understand your partner correctly, then that's good because it means you can continue your discussion and be sure that you understand each other. If you misunderstand your partner, you might be arguing a completely different thing. And you might actually agree with your partner, but you just haven't realized it because you are misunderstanding what your partner is saying. So this one gives your partner an opportunity to clarify what they're saying to make sure that doesn't happen. You can accept suggestions, that's a good idea, or thanks for reminding me, or why don't we try that? Okay, I hadn't thought of that as a really good one again to show respect to your partner. Or you can reject suggestions. That would be great, except words like except or but are useful there. So you don't need to memorize this entire list. In fact, I don't suggest it. I don't recommend it. Because memorizing a whole list doesn't necessarily mean that you can use everything on the list. So it's much better to first memorize 4 or 5 of these that you think will be the most useful for you. Then, next time you're talking about topics in English, try to put those 4 or 5 into the conversation at a suitable opportunity. If you can, if you do it successfully, then memorize 4 or 5 more. And 4 or 5 more, and 4 or 5 more, until your conversation is full of these phrases. Okay. This is also good because it will give you confidence in sharing your ideas and your opinions if you know how to introduce an idea, how to check if you understand something, how to stay strong even though they're trying to change your mind, how to calm things down. Having a few of these phrases, kind of like having tools in your belt. Right? If you have a lot of tools in your belt, you're ready for a lot more situations. If you have few tools in your belt, you're only ready for a few situations. So learn some of these phrases because every phrase is like a tool in your belt that you might be able to use when you need it. Download this handout, study it, and when you're talking about complex issues or debating things in class or elsewhere, go ahead and pull this out and just put it on your desk so that you can check it while you're talking. So that's the language of sharing opinions. This is going to be the end of my introduction video. Now please stay tuned for the next video in this series, which is going to be about disagreeing, finding an opinion, and supporting an opinion. We've talked about explaining opinions. Next, we're going to talk about supporting them, as well as supporting our disagreement through arguments and counter-arguments. Go to part 2 of the class videos.